Welcome to Stories with Traction, unedited and unfiltered. These are real conversations with leaders who have walked through trials and triumph. In a world of AI-polished sound bites and scripted perfection, this podcast isn't about being flawless. It's about being purposeful. I'm your host, Matt Zahn. We're going to find out what drives these leaders, what's their story, and how can we learn from their experiences. Get inspired and enjoy Stories with Traction. Jiff, welcome to Stories with Traction podcast.
Thanks for having me, Matt.
I'm so excited you're here. Thank you for your time. Before we dive into your background, your story, I love asking this question. When you are at a networking event or a party and someone asks you, what do you do? What's your response to that question?
I always share that I am here to help serve both men and women going through a transitional phase in their life and kind of asking themselves, is this it? I think a lot of people are having a kind of a midlife awakening, and I've had mine. And so I just share what I've learned going through that transition, because it's certainly not easy, and witness people come out the other side with much more clarity, confidence, excitement that this next season of their life can be all that they want it to be.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that I'm really focused on is storytelling, right? It's particularly strategic storytelling, primarily for a lot of different businesses. And when we dive into story work, one of the things that I find fascinating is every great story. So if you think of an amazing book, if you think of an incredible movie that you've watched, the transition is what we love. We love that struggle victory story. We love the ordinary world and then the new reality, right? So it's that transition. We like to see, especially if we're envisioning a movie and there's a particular character and they're pushing and they're struggling and they're working really hard, that's the ordinary world. And then there's a breakthrough and that's the new reality. And that's like every audience is like, yes, I'm so excited for that character, especially if it does a really good job from a story perspective of us connecting to that character. We have sometimes a feeling of empathy, right? But transition can be, like you had mentioned, really difficult, and transition can make or break people, right? So transition can fundamentally change someone's life, and their life could be way better because of a transition, or it could be detrimental. People could fall into depression. People could be doing all kinds of things that actually destroy them. So what would you say people need to be thinking of if they're in a really, like if they know and they recognize that they're in the midst of an incredibly challenging transition? What are a few things that you would recommend that they do and think about to make sure that it ends up well?
Yeah. So when I was going through a transitional phase in my life 9 years ago, I eventually came to realize, when I was working for a corporate organization, had overcome a scary health challenge the year before, thought I could go back to corporate sales and it feel the same as it did before. And it didn't. And when I was driving around in my car, I would cry almost every day in my car for a period of several months. Yet I was still, calling on accounts, meeting with buyers, trying to close deals. And I was crumbling inside. And I just had this moment of like, it can't be like this anymore. I can't continue to feel this way. Something has to change. And I believe that that's the difference between people. We all probably need support in some way, but how bad do you want it? And I wanted it bad enough. So I reached out to my first life coach in 2018, and I didn't know what a life coach was. And yet I leaned in with curiosity because I knew I could no longer feel the way that I was feeling. So it was reaching out for help. So that's something I hope your audience understands, is that, whatever you're going through, you may feel alone, and yet you're not. So it's really finding that person that can help walk alongside you to support you through the transitional phase.
You said something I want to process a little bit further. So just so I get an idea of where you were at this time of your life, you mentioned crying daily, and then you mentioned calling on accounts. So you were actively involved in sales at this point?
Correct. So just to give you more context, the year before, so in 2016, I had hit President's Club. I had started with that organization the year before that and hit this pinnacle of what professional sales is. And I thought at the time, right, this external affirmation, this external achievement, that's where it was. Life was cruising. I felt really great about it. And yet, as I'm trying to grind for another one the following year, it felt harder. Some accounts weren't saying yes, they were saying no. And it just felt like I was putting more stress and pressure on myself than I even realized. And so, truthfully, in March of 2017, my body was tracking all of this. And I chose not to probably be proactively listen. And I suffered a major stroke while in corporate sales. So, after a lot of physical rehab and recovery, I had gone back 5 months later, thinking I was healed enough to go back and that it was going to feel the same. And when I that's when the mental and emotional aspects of recovery were just beginning, because physically I had recovered well. No one would ever know I've had a stroke. And yet I feel completely different inside, even 9 years later to this day. But the mental and emotional parts were just showing up. And those are the parts you don't physically see. So that's what I guess I mean by, how things felt a lot different when I went back. And that's when I knew I needed support.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack with what you said. So
Yeah.
you're 2016, you reached President's Club. So very successful from a sales perspective, right? You're not a newbie sales rep just trying to figure things out. Like, you had reached a very high level of success in your company, right? So you have that success. So then the following year, you said March of 2017, you suffer a stroke and you're going through all kinds of different things to try to rehabilitate. And then 5 months later, you said you come back. Is it the exact same role 5 months later?
Yes.
Okay, so you come back to the exact same role. So here's what I want to process with you, because you'd mentioned crying in your car, and I find this fascinating because I after COVID, like I loosely use the word professionalism because I don't even know what that is anymore. Like, I feel like our definition of professionalism has changed, right? Especially since COVID. I'm not saying that we shouldn't like focus on being professional, but I guess it really depends on different environments and industries, and everyone's version of what professional is can be different, right? But so there is a level of that professionalism. I'm using air quotes, meaning going in, obviously doing your best. But the crying piece is interesting to me because I was mentioning to you prior to our recording, I've done a bunch of speaking engagements, I've done workshops, I've done keynotes, and there are times that life is just really, really stressful. There are times that like there are different things happening in my personal life. There are different things like going on. I might be incredibly angry about something. I might be sleep deprived. I might be battling some type of sickness, and I still have to get up on stage and I have to be professional, offer value. And it seems like, you're in your car, you're crying daily. There's an element of deep distress. Um, Something's going on that obviously needs help with something. You need relief, you need restoration, you need all these different things. You need recovery, right? To heal, but yet you're still showing up, you're still calling on accounts. So where's the balance between, there's individuals listening to this episode that they are battling through intense stuff. They want to show up for their family. They want to show up at work. They want success. They want to deliver value. So where's the balance between, even when life is crumbling in a way, and having a stroke is incredibly intense, right? I have not had one, but I would, it's not easy, right? So
Right.
where's the balance between showing up and doing your best when things are not working out, but also recognizing like, I really do need the help? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that because I can give you a specific example that stands out to me. A few months later, after coming back, my sales manager told me that our VP of the region wanted to ride with me for the day. And I was partly excited because I very much respected and valued her and was looking forward to it. And on the other hand, I was like, I don't feel ready. I don't feel prepared. I don't feel like I'm in this great headspace to have someone like that be in the car with me. Yet I still leaned in and said, okay. And She met with me. I had the day planned. We hit a couple of accounts together, and then we pulled in the parking lot of the third account, and I break down in my car. And I feel like that is a make or break moment for someone that is struggling and has someone they respect and value at their company potentially riding in the car with them. You don't know what they're riding necessarily with you for, right? Are they checking in on you? Is this a good thing? Is this, you know, what does that feel like? Or is this a micromanaging thing? What is this? And she was the person that allowed me to sit there and express what I was going through. And she sat with me in the car. And that meant more to me than she could ever know. Because I felt safe enough to do it, where I don't know, some leaders may that might make them feel uncomfortable. So then it's this awkward, moment for two people. And I've heard stories of people that have struggled and they go to their management or leadership and it doesn't go well. And they weren't treated the way I was treated. So, this corporate organization I was with, I couldn't be more grateful the way that they treated me during my time of struggle.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's an incredible story because some people would have felt very uncomfortable in that situation. I want you to talk about this. You probably didn't think that I was going to bring this up. I didn't even think I was going to bring this up, but I think it's quite interesting to talk about the crying piece. I feel like a lot of people look down on crying, especially in the workplace. Like it is
Totally.
absolutely. Some people don't even tolerate it. I had a mentor a couple of years ago tell me weak men don't cry because they're afraid of their emotions. And I actually had a mentor tell me, Matt, you actually need to cry more in life because you don't have a heart. And I mean, that was interesting advice, right?
Yeah, it is.
And I've really processed through that quite often because if we're talking, men and women, like I do know a lot of men that they fight as hard as they possibly can not to cry, but the emotions come up in other instances, right? It might come up with bombastic anger. It's
Right.
interesting because in the workplace, like intense anger, I feel like is more tolerated than crying, which is it's very interesting to process through on why would anger be more desirable than sadness, right? Because I don't think emotions are right or wrong. It's just what we're sitting in, what we're feeling at that moment. Brene Brown, I'm sure you're familiar with her work on vulnerability and
Yes.
courage and tons of emotions the human mind can detect. So it's interesting. It's interesting to process through and think about. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on the crying piece? Because like there's a lot of tough stuff that people go through. What could we do as leaders when someone might be crying or someone might be experiencing distress? What are some ways maybe that we could look for or how we're supposed to embrace or handle that?
Yeah, great question. And what we both know to be true is anger is just a mask for something else. Um, Anger to me is an outwardly way to show that something is unhealed within you. You haven't dealt with something, you don't know how to deal with something, and your body's going to express frustration because that's, as a society, what we've been taught, like you said, more than if you've got emotion to come up, let it out. From a crying or tear standpoint, I find it very much a strength, especially for male leaders. And I had one when I was at this corporate organization. The sales leader I had was a male. I felt safe every single time to go into his office, and he would first treat me like the human being I was before he treated me like a sales rep on his team. And so if I did feel that emotion come up, I would not hide it from him because he allowed for me to have the moment without judgment. And I appreciate that, especially coming from a male. When I speak a lot of times to different audiences, a lot of more women dominated audiences, they're going to express their vulnerability a little bit more. And when I share an example of me meeting with my life coach the first couple of times, and I would feel emotion come up, but yet I wouldn't want to express it because I was tired of doing it. I was done crying because I felt like I'd cried so much. And yet, if you think about when emotions come up and you push them down, it hurts. it actually hurts to hold back the tears. And every time I say that in a room, so many women are shaking their heads and fighting back tears because they've done it so often. When you do that, your body is tracking and keeping the score. And it's going to eventually, the more you push it down, it's going to come out bigger and uglier the moment you finally let it out.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. You mentioned the vulnerability piece, and I'm fascinated like everyone else regarding AI technology, trying to think about where's it going to go, what does the future entail, especially as a father that has three young kids. Like I'm constantly mindful of like what kind of future are they going to have, what should they be focused on. But one of the things, and we're not here to talk about like AI and debate what could happen or won't happen. I mean, I feel like we're horrible predictors of the future. If you look throughout history, like we really do not predict the future well as humans. But I do think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I do think vulnerability is going to be even more desired as
Mm.
AI grows because it's like you said, that human connection. You said that your boss at the time, talking to you as a human first before talking to you like a sales rep. I think that's so important because AI cannot replace vulnerability. It cannot replace our connection with another human. So can you talk a little about vulnerability? I guess first define it for us, because I think everyone might have a different
Mm.
definition in their mind. So first define it for us, and then where do you see vulnerability from like a, I don't even know if you would call it like a skill set, but from a highly desired uh, concept, if you will, going forward in the future?
Powerful question. Vulnerability to me is understanding that you are leading with your authentic self. You're not trying to say or do anything to think that it's going to please someone else, or you're just trying to find that approval externally. The more vulnerable I get with what I've been through in my life, the more connection I'm going to have with people around me. The more we all understand we have more in common than we realize when it comes to the human aspect of life. And I think maybe that's gone away from us, depending on what space you're in, what industry you're in, how big your company is. It's like we've all got something. We're all carrying something. The more you feel you are in a space to be able to unload that something, the better connection that you're going to build with everyone around you. I think it builds camaraderie and more, morale, just a more positive work environment when you know, like, hey, we're not all here just checking the box and hitting numbers every day. We're talking about real things too. What's working, what's not working.
Yeah, I like that definition, leading with your authentic self. So this might be a horrible question, but I do think it is. It's just interesting, in my opinion. So, do you think that there is a place for, I could use the word strategic, I could use the word intentional vulnerability or authenticity? I feel like some people might use that to manipulate others, but I do feel, especially if we're talking about the corporate environment, there's some things that we should or shouldn't say. There's some things that we might be disclosing too much, right? And there might be some things that we should literally be talking to like a counselor about versus in a room full of a team that we're leading. What are your thoughts on that? What are your because to truly be your authentic self, especially in the corporate environment, there might be some things that we shouldn't do, but yet we don't want to mask ourselves so much that we become like an actor, if you will. So what are your thoughts on like a strategic, intentional vulnerability, or authenticity? Or do you say no one should think about that? We should just be who we are, be authentic 100%. What are your thoughts on that?
Uh, I feel like it could go a couple of different directions. What stands out to me though with this organization that I was with, the year before my stroke, they created a mentorship program. And so I was a mentor before my stroke to newer hires to support them on a, have calls on a monthly basis. And that felt honestly more, it was more set up professionally. Like, how can I support you professionally? And then months later, I came back after my stroke and was still a mentor and still bringing new hires in, and we would have calls monthly. And maybe it was because my perspective had changed as far as how I wanted to support them And yet they felt comfortable being able to come to me as a mentor. So maybe it wasn't, they didn't feel comfortable yet going to their sales manager, but they had someone to come to say, I'm not here to ask you about a situation, today, an account, a buyer. I'm here to share this. Like, I'm going through this right now, and I just want to be seen and heard for who I am. And that was honestly one of the proudest roles I had that I can think about. So it was interesting to have that role pre-stroke versus post. So I guess I share, I hope people have somebody they can go to professionally, because that's where we
Sure.
spend a lot of our time. And if you don't, is that the place for you at the end of the day? Another thing I would share is, as doing the work that I've done on me and supporting others, is building the self-awareness muscle. Like, how self-aware are you to kind of pay attention to what's going on? What am I really feeling? What do I need to do about it? And not knowing you can't do it alone. You're not supposed to do it alone.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So having different corners where we can share more for sure, vulnerability, authentic. And the reason why I even brought that up is because I feel like a lot more people are talking about the like being authentic, and they don't really know what to do with that. They think that they should just be sharing everything with everyone to try to connect more. And I've been in rooms where even like very successful leaders, I'm sitting as an audience member and I'm hearing some of the things they're saying, and I'm just thinking like, ooh, like I appreciate your willingness to share this, but this is just not the right room to be saying that in front of. So I really appreciate what you're saying about like, yes, there needs to be spaces for that for sure. I do want to talk to you about identity though. I think it's incredibly important um, for people to think about. I feel like there are times that people may create an identity around whether it's a particular incident or an accident or a disease, or even if it's like a mental health situation. And like even me personally, I've found that dangerous and very difficult to overcome. So I'll share with you, me personally, I've had multiple seasons of intense battles with OCD, right? And as a culture, a lot of people don't truly understand what obsessive compulsive disorder is. They think it's obsessive hand washing. There's multiple different elements of OCD. And there were times in my life where it was absolutely crippling, right? Like multiple years. It was really tough. I'm incredibly grateful that I don't really struggle or battle that as much anymore. And I've worked really hard on it. There are different tendencies that have actually helped me in a big, big way from an obsession type perspective, like helped me to succeed in different areas. But there were times where my entire identity was surrounded around that. And I had difficulty sharing that with people because then I'm thinking, that's how they're going to peg me. They're going to have this, the identity that they're going to see in me is just someone that struggles with OCD. So how have you viewed the stroke in your life from an identity perspective? And what would you say to anyone listening that they have gone through a challenge, but they're making now their entire identity around that challenge? What would you say to that?
Yeah, such a great question, man. Thank you for sharing your personal experience. It's a it's a choice that you make every day. And it's interesting with stroke because it impacts the brain. So there were certainly those first couple of years, I didn't have the awareness that I would even, that I had that identity of woe is me. Okay. And the more I continued to work on myself and invest in myself and create that daily choice of how do I want to show up, I have seen, for example, certain stroke survivors certainly take on that identity and continue to say, why is me? Why this have to happen to me? And it's that mindset shift of, this happened for me. Why? What's the reason this happened for me? And that's the work, I'm one of the many reasons I'm grateful for my first coach, right? To basically hold up a mirror for me and ask that question. Once I can transition from why me to why not me, everything changed for me. It started to. And with stroke, I'm almost 9 years out. Um, and I'm certainly in a place where I can say what a gift it's been for me. And it's really, I hope, inspiring others when they hear a conversation like this and have gone through something, for them to shift the question in their mind of like, why not me? What is this showing me? What is this teaching me? Then how can I potentially teach others going through something very similar? That's the big difference.
That is such a perspective shift. I really appreciate you sharing that. Go from why me to why not me. I had a boss who became a really good friend. Obviously he's no longer my boss now, but one of the best bosses I've ever had in my life. A really good friend. And my wife and I, there was a situation that happened recently that was incredibly intense that we had to face together. Something like an outside type thing that happened, and I think we're very grateful because like our marriage was strengthened. There were a lot of good things that came out of us. It's interesting because sometimes like you can fight someone else, and then when something comes at you, like you end up lockstep fighting something together. So like it's interesting how challenges can bring people together or tear people apart. And I was on the phone with my former boss, who now is a good friend, and I was just sharing with him like just different things that were happening that were incredibly frustrating. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, if I was in a room full of 100 people and I could give that challenge out to any one of them, I would pick you, right? And he said, because you and your wife, you're the only ones that I know that can actually face that and handle that. And that was like a real perspective shift to me because I was kind of wallowing in my like sadness and anger and frustration. Like, why do we have to deal with this? Like, why, like exactly what you're saying, why me? And then once, he said this to me, I'm like, okay, well, maybe we were positioned to handle that. Like, why not me? What could I use? How could I use this to strengthen myself? So I really appreciate it. There's a lot of wisdom in what you just said. I do want to talk a little bit about your workshops. You do workshops, you do keynotes, you do coaching. If a company wanted to bring you in, let's say for a workshop, what are some of the concepts that you teach on?
There's a couple that I've done more than others. One is I have a workshop and keynote that's kind of themed around how to overcome a victim mentality and embrace your inner warrior. So that's personal to me because as I started to I created my business in 2020 and went through my certification in 2021 to become a certified coach, which was transformational in and of itself. And then I started to do podcast guesting. And so what I would start to notice as people were interviewing me, they would call me a stroke victim. And that was very triggering for me because I would think I would only be a victim if it took my life. I would have been victim of a stroke. I'm still here. And yet, as I've connected with also other stroke survivors, especially around that time frame, you could tell the ones that were survivors and you could tell the ones that were victims of their stroke and still here because they had that mindset of why me? I just want to go back to the way I was before my stroke. Why me? And it's like, until you realize you're never going to have that version of you ever again, you will stay stuck right there where you are. And like talking about that identity piece that we were talking about. And so as I played out creating this keynote, I was able to uncover where victim mentality comes from, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like, and then how to create that mindset shift into what I call your warrior mentality, which is all about elevating your self-awareness, being able to pause and question, okay, what can I control in this situation? What am I letting control me? Understanding where you can take your power back. What has grip over you that you have no control over the outcome or what's happening, but you can kind of control. What can you control, right? Your attitude, your effort, the next step you take. So really providing those tools for folks to be able to empower themselves. And honestly, one of the things that stands out to me and one thing that I hope people walk away with today is really paying attention to your self-talk, your dialogue, because that's where it starts, right? Every morning when you wake up, what are you saying to yourself in the mirror? Because whatever that conversation is, that's the attitude you're going to take out into the rest of your day and project onto everyone else.
We have so much self-talk. Like, don't we talk to ourselves
Oh,
more than
yeah.
anyone else? Isn't most of it negative? Isn't it most of it
Right.
mo like I know people like it's so cliche to say, oh, like we're our worst critic, but like we're terrible on ourselves. Like there are things that
Awful.
I think to myself I would never say to another human being, like ever.
Right.
So, what are some strategies or concepts you recommend? Because that's a huge undertaking, right? With all the thousands of thoughts we have in a given day. I don't even know how many. I'm just throwing it. I mean, it's more than a
Thousands.
dozen thoughts, right? It's a lot, right? It's
Thousands.
thousands.
Yeah.
So, how can someone even start to reprogram their mind and their self-talk?
It certainly takes intentionality. And I always provide a few examples of what this can look like. So, a couple ones that stand out to me are simple and yet powerful. If you tell yourself you can't do something, your brain is going to find all the evidence of why you can't do something versus saying, I can do this. I can go for this next position. I can go for that promotion. I can apply for that next job. Your brain's going to then find all the evidence of why you can because it's going to go back to your past and see where you were able to do things. Right. Another example is I'm not ready. I am not. I am not good enough. I am not strong enough. Whatever that is, being able to catch yourself and say, I am capable enough. And your brain's going to find the evidence of why you're capable enough or why you're good enough or why you're strong enough. And the biggest, smallest shift when it comes to self talk is taking the word but out of your vocabulary. I want to go for this, but I can't. Right? When you're explaining something to someone, switching the word from but to and is such a powerful shift. So, for example, when I was going through my coaching certification, this always stands out to me. And this girl wanted to implement a subscription program to her business. And our coach, she would always emphasize the word and. I don't know if I ever heard her say but one time. And it just really stood out to me because she would say, I hear that you want to start this subscription program, and I would suggest doing it another way. And here's why. Because once you say but, Matt, you negate everything that person just said. Right? Even when you're in a personal relationship with your spouse or whoever it is, your family member. I hear what you're saying, but no. Or like it's a conversation, it's a game changer to really pay attention to the words that you're saying to yourself and with others, because people will pick up on that. And your brain's going to find evidence of what you believe is true.
I appreciate what you just did there. You used and, right? So there you
Yeah.
go. Well done. Well
way
played.
to way to catch that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate everything you shared. A lot of value. There are a few things in particular that I'm going to have as a takeaway from this conversation. I appreciate you defining what vulnerability is. I feel that's a word that we throw around all the time, especially now as a culture. Very few people can define it. I love your definition, leading with your authentic self. The second piece that I think is a huge perspective shift, and it's not a once and done thing. It's something that we can always challenge ourselves, sometimes even daily if we're really going through a challenging situation, is you said, go from why me to why not me. Huge perspective shift. I think that really changes things for a lot of people. And then you went on to say, until you realize you will never have that life again, you will stay stuck. That's powerful. And then the final piece that you mentioned was what you just said recently about taking but out of your vocabulary and using and. It's going to take me a while to form that habit, but I'm willing to commit to you to do that. So, Jeff, thank you so much for everything that you shared. If someone wants to get more information on what you do, they want to reach out to you for a keynote or for a workshop, where's the best place they can go to get that information?
Yeah, thank you so much for the time and this opportunity, Matt. I've loved our conversation. My website is justcommitcoaching.com. And so you can easily book a call with me there with regards to keynotes, workshops, and or coaching. And I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. So I would love anyone to connect with me on LinkedIn under Jennifer Chapman. Self leadership coach. It's leadership starts with self. So it's really as a leader, are you someone that you would follow? And so I help support, you know, both men and women leaders into are you someone you would follow. And it starts with self each and every day. So like LinkedIn and jessicamickcoaching.com to book a call.
Perfect. I'll include that in the show notes. People could just click and go from there. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you found this discussion helpful, please leave a review, since positive reviews help others find these conversations. New episodes drop regularly, so stay tuned. And remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to take action, you must share more stories.